What is meant by a bucket? Bucket क्या होती है? So before we understand what is a bucket, let's first understand why do we need a bucket? Bucket की ज़रूरत क्यों है? तो जब हम लोग वेब एप्लीकेशन बनाते हैं तो हम लोगों को स्टोर करना रहता है, डेटा स्टोर करना रहता है, एंड समटाइम्स along with data we need to store files as well. For storing the data, we have databases like MySQL, MongoDB, which facilitate the storage of data. They persist the data and they provide a way to retrieve the data whenever we need to. Okay, like MongoDB provides a way, like it provides its own query language, like find by ID. Like if we need to read the data and if we need to write the data, then there is an insert or update or delete. So those are the methods that are available to write the data. So similarly, we need to store the files as well. And to store the files, we need some kind of facility where we can store them. So Amazon Web Service provides a way to do that. Like on all operating system, we have all the operating system like Windows, Linux, or Mac OS. They provide a way to save data and save files. Like we have files in folder system. सारे ऑपरेटिंग सिस्टम फाइल्स एंड फोल्डर सिस्टम प्रोवाइड करते हैं जिसका यूज़ करके हम लोग फाइल्स को स्टोर कर सकते हैं. वी कैन ऑर्गेनाइज द डेटा, वी कैन ऑर्गेनाइज द फाइल्स एंड we can retrieve them whenever we want to. We can open them and we can read them or we can write to them, right? So this files and folder provided by operating system act as a spacing storage facility, we can say. So similarly, Amazon S3, which is simple storage service. So S3 भी एक तरह का स्टोरेज सर्विस है. S3 में जब डेटा स्टोर करते हैं, so it provides a convenient way to do that because we can't directly go and save the data on S3. Like we need some kind of arrangement there so that like we can identify the data, we can identify files from each other. Okay, so the very simple things, like let's take an example of bucket. Okay, the term bucket literally, हम सबके घरों में बकेट्स होती है. बकेट्स में हम लोग यूजुअली वाटर स्टोर करते हैं और हम लोगों के यहाँ पे मल्टीपल बकेट्स होती है. In one bucket we can have normal water, in one bucket we can have warm water, like in. So buckets basically provides us a way to store water and also a way to separate the water from each other. Like if you have different kind of waters, then we can separate them using bucket. So on the same line, AWS S3 provides a way to organize the data, and the logical unit to that is a bucket. Using a bucket, or more precisely, using a S3 bucket, we can store data, we can store files, any kind of files. So that is, in a very simple term, a bucket or a S3 bucket. Okay. Then, is there, or basically, is S3 is the only way to store data or store files? What is the what are the benefits of using S3 compared to other options that we have, right? So obviously S3 is not the only way to store data. Before S3 came into picture a few years ago only. Okay, and since everything is going to cloud, AWS and S3 is getting popularity more and more by each day. So before S3 came into picture, there were some other ways available. Just say, if you are using MySQL database, so you can directly store a file in the database itself, in a column, in a cell, using the blob method. Basically, blob is a type using which we can create a table column in which we can store the binary data, basically the image file as a blob data into the database directly. If you are using MongoDB, then MongoDB also provide a way to store the file directly into the database, that is using the binary data type. So relational databases like MySQL or Postgres provides blob data type, and MongoDB provides a binary data type using which we can directly store the file. So that was a way to store the files in database directly before S3 came into picture, or basically before any cloud service provider came into picture. Other way could be we can convert the file into base64 string and then store it into the database. However, that is not the recommended way, because when we convert the file into base64 string, it is very huge. बहुत बड़ी हो जाती है वो, like in the size. It's very huge in the size, and storing that into the database will increase the size of the database, which results in higher query time. जब हमको read करना रहता है data, that it takes a lot of time to read the data from the database then. Second thing, every time you are reading the data, you need to read the base64 string, then convert it into the file format, the proper file format, like an image, audio, or video, whatever was the original type of it. So that is why it's not the recommended way. Then there was a third way, like we store the data on S3 nowadays, and then we store the link of that data of that file into a database. So we can do the same thing, but instead of storing the file onto the S3 bucket, we can store the file into the server file system only. A server is like a server is like a machine only, like which has some file system. So we can use that file system to store our files, and then we can store the path of that file into a database. That way, we can still store the data, still store the file into the in some way, either directly into the database or indirectly in the database, like saving the path only in the database. So these were some options available. They are still available, but nowadays we are mostly using cloud based services like S3 provided by AWS. Why it's getting popularity? Like that would be a question. S3 इतना famous क्यों हो रहा है? S3 इतना popular क्यों हो रहा है? Because there are some benefits, there are some advantage when we are using S3 bucket. So some of the basic advantage or benefits that S3 provide over other options are high availability. The AWS claim that the S3 bucket provide the high availability. It says that it provides the 99.99% of availability, which means हम लोगों को जब भी data read करना है, whenever we want to read the files from the S3, they would be available. They won't be having a downtime. Like ऐसा नहीं होगा कि हम लोग S3 से file read करना चाहते हैं, S3 is not available. The file is not available to read. So that is one of the biggest advantage that S3 provides. The second thing is scalability, which means whenever we need to scale up or scale down, like हम लोगों को कभी बहुत ज़्यादा files store करना है या बहुत ज़्यादा data store करना है, so we can buy additional or we can use additional storage. AWS provides that facility. S3 provides that facility. Like as of now, अगर हम लोग 5 GB of data storage use कर रहे हैं, and for a short period of time, let's say एक month के लिए हम लोगों को we need additional storage. Maybe we need 50 GB instead of 5 GB. So we can use that 50 GB for 1 month, and जब हम लोगों का काम पूरा हो जाए, we can again scale down to 5 GB. That is our initial requirement. So that is also a benefit when we are using S3. Like we don't have to continuously using the higher storage even if we don't need it. हम लोगों को जितना ज़रूरत है हम उतना space use करेंगे, and we don't have to pay for any other storage. अगर 5 GB use करना है तो we can only get 5 GB, और हम लोगों को सिर्फ 5 GB के लिए पेमेंट करना रहेगा. So high scalability. Scalability is another feature of S3. We can scale up or scale down. Means we can increase the storage or we can decrease the storage as per our will, as per our need. Then data backup and recovery. So obviously, when we are working with data, we need to make sure that we have proper backup mechanism for that. Which means हमारा डेटा सिक्योर होना चाहिए, हमारा डेटा की कॉपीज अवेलेबल होना चाहिए इन केस अवर डेटा गॉट करप्टेड, डेटा में कुछ प्रॉब्लम आती है, डेटा करप्ट हो जाता है या डेटा मिसप्लेस हो जाता है, सो वी नीड अ वे टू रीस्टोर दैट डेटा. So AWS S3 provides very good options for that as well. It provides a way to do data backup and we don't have to do it manually. हम लोग automatically setup भी कर सकते हैं. We can set up S3 to take backup on a regular basis, maybe on a uh, every 15 days or every month. We can have a storage we can have a backup facility in place, and in case of any data loss, we can recover from that backup. So that is another a huge advantage that we get from S3. Then easy integration with web and mobile. So S3 provides an SDK, AWS SDK हम लोगों को मिलता है, using which we can easily integrate the S3 service with our web application or our mobile application. So integration बहुत easy हो जाता है and it will be available like once we are using S3 and S3 buckets to store our files. The files would be easily available to a web application or a mobile application very easily. So there are some benefits when we are using AWS S3 bucket. Right? Moving on, the next is what is meant by cache and caching. Okay, so कैश या कैशिंग समझने के लिए हम लोग पहले समझते हैं ज़रूरत क्यों है इस चीज़ की. ओके, सो जैसे हम लोगों के घर में अगेन आई विल टेक द एग्जांपल ऑफ वाटर. तो हम लोगों के घर में यूजुअली एक एरिया होता है, डेजिग्नेटेड एरिया होता है जहाँ पे हम लोग वाटर रखते हैं, पीने का पानी रखते हैं बेसिकली. एंड फॉर पीने का पानी वी यूजुअली हैव पॉट्स, मड पॉट्स, मटके बोलते हैं हम लोग जिसको, काइंड ऑफ दैट थिंग. सो वो एक सर्टेन प्लेस पे रखा होता है एंड यूजुअली दैट इज टुवर्ड्स द एंड ऑफ द हाउस. मोस्ट ऑफ द टाइम ऐसा ही होता है. But like water is stored there, we can go and drink from it. हम लोग पानी वहाँ जाके पी सकते हैं. But still sometimes we use a water bottle, एक छोटा 1 लीटर का पानी का बॉटल या 2 लीटर या 5 लीटर के पानी का बॉटल हम लोग भर के we usually place it to the place where we are spending most of the time. जैसे अभी most of the people are working from home, तो even though we have a place where all the drinking water is kept, सारी जगह जहाँ पे मटके और रखा हुआ है पीने का पानी, still हम लोग 1 लीटर का पानी का बॉटल भर के we usually keep it as close to our desk, close to our working desk. या फिर हम लोग ऑफिस का एग्जांपल ले तो ऑफिस में भी वाटर कूलर्स लगे रहते हैं and usually that is like towards the end or like it is one place only. Despite having a water cooler in the office, we usually carry a bottle. हम लोग bottle fill करके we usually keep it at our desk. Why? Why we do that? Like हम लोग water cooler तक जा सकते हैं या फिर हम लोग मटके तक जा सकते हैं पानी पीने के लिए. But why do we keep it in a bottle close to where we are working? The reason is हम लोगों को water जल्दी मिल जाए. Like it just very close to us, like it's close to us and it is easily reachable. हम लोग बहुत easy से उसको reach कर सकते हैं. We can drink water whenever we want to. Okay, so basically ease of access मिल जाता है and it takes less time. अगर मुझे वाटर कूलर तक जाना है या फिर मुझे मटके तक जाना है तो it will take at least couple of minutes. उतनी देर में मैं पानी पी के and like I can start working again if the water is available at my desk. Right, so the same thing uh, is applicable in web application as well. The same thing is applicable in web application as well. जब हम वेब एप्लीकेशन बनाते हैं तो हम लोगों का जो डेटा रहता है, like we can take this water analogy and apply to the web application that we are going to create or that we are creating. तो हम वेब एप्लीकेशन बनाते हैं तो हम लोग डेटा स्टोर करते हैं and we can consider this data as a water. We can compare it. So we are storing water in mud pot. Similarly, we are storing the data into a database. All right. And who is accessing this data? So the application, the web application, the backend application is accessing this data. Backend application को database से डेटा लेना रहता है, वो क्वेरी करता है, sometime it reads the data, sometime it writes the data, right? So to write the data, it must have to go to the database तक जाना ही पड़ेगा उसको data write करने के लिए. But when it comes to read the data, like we can arrange for something. So instead of reading the data every time from the database, we can read only once, and then we can, if we can store it somehow close to the web application, then we don't have to go to the database again to read the same data, right? So basically this mechanism, this process in which we are availing the ease of access to the data to the backend application is known as caching. Okay, cache कर लिया उसको बोलते हैं. Cache कर लिया as in, because like in our system, like if we talk about our systems, so database store all the data onto the hard disk drive. They use some kind of file formats to store the data on the hard disk, तभी वो persist कर पाते हैं. They are able to persist the data even after multiple read and write. The data is available, like whenever we need the data can be read from there. But in order to read that data, like it takes time to go to the database, then request him to read the data, then database read the data from the file system, underlying file system, then return the data. So it takes time. To reduce the time, we we can store the data somewhere nearby, and for that we can use cache caching mechanism. ओके, तो हम लोगों के सिस्टम में एक रैम होती है और एक कैश मेमोरी भी होती है. सो बेसिकली दोस आर रिलेटिवली फास्ट कंपेयर टू द हार्ड डिस्क ड्राइव. Okay, even the cache memory has certain levels of it: L1, L2, L3, L4. These are the different levels that are available of cache memory. So storing that data in a cache memory or in the RAM provides a much faster access to it compared to storing into the database or basically reading it from the database. The data तो हम लोगों को database में store करना है, but it's kind of a, we are keeping a copy of it nearby in the cache memory so that we can read it in a fast way, read it in less time. So this method of keeping the data into the cache memory is known as caching. Okay, and the reason is so that we can have quick access to it, we can read it very quickly from it, we don't have to go to the database. But first time we have to read it from the from the database only. एक बार database से read करके हम लोग cache में store कर सकते हैं, and then फिर cache से next time we don't have to go to the database, we can directly read it from the cache memory, right? So that is the mechanism of improving the performance of our backend server or our APIs. Caching करने के लिए, like we need certain thing. So there are certain tools available for that as well, like Redis. Redis is a database which provides the facility to store the data in a simple key value format and stores the data in a cache memory so that it can be retrieved very easily. Memcached is another such tool, right? So there are a few options available, few tools available which enable us to store data in a cache, and the process of uh, saving the data into cache is known as caching. Right. So we talked about Redis. Why do we need it? Okay. So as I explained, like we can definitely go and read the data from database. All right. But in order to read the data in less time, to have a less time for our API response, like as soon as we get a request from the client, we should be able to respond as quickly as possible. जितने कम समय में हम लोग रिस्पॉन्स कर सके वापस, उतना अच्छा रहता है हम लोगों की APIs के लिए, that are considered good APIs. To improve the performance of our backend application, sometimes we use caching mechanism to store the data. And to have the caching mechanism in place, Redis is one of the option available out there, and that's why we use Redis for our caching mechanism purpose. Thank you. What is meant by a